I have 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for, as you can see on the screen, Curing Your Paper Recorder Headaches. Our presenter today is Lesman's own Dan Weise. Today, Dan is going to change the way you think about paper recording and how replacing them with paperless will give you usable, actionable data right on your desktop. Paperless recorders have been around almost 30 years now. They're not a fad, and they're now a valuable tool for data collecting and alarming. Dan has been involved in all facets of process instrumentation since 1978, from sales and commissioning to service and support. He's a longtime member of ISA and has been with Lesman since 1988. Dan is a primary contributor to our Process Solutions blog and routinely travels out to customers to help solve their instrumentation problems and help them get the most out of the technologies they use. In his own words, Dan is the guy who reads all the manuals nobody else reads. In Lesman's customers' words, he's the trainer to call if you want to cut to the so what of instrumentation and make it easy to understand. The phone lines are muted. If you have a question, there's a question tool built into GoToWebinar. Please send me the questions and I'll get them answered for you. With that, Dan, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Well, welcome to our webinar on dealing with paper recorders nowadays. Lesman's been doing recorders for 50, 60 years now, and we service a huge installed base. As you can see from the photographs there, we stock over 60 circular two-line and 4,300 circular chart recorders, and every day we ship out 2 or 3 of these things. Most of this is going to be oriented at the circular paper market because a lot of the strip chart people have already changed over, but whatever I say applies to strip charts as well as the circular chart recorders. So with the fact that we're still shipping 2 to 3 circular recorders a day that record on paper, you got to ask yourself, there must be something right with paper recorders, and what is that? Well, the fact is the data's on the paper, and once it's on the paper, it chases away the gremlins. That's why recorders have been used in the first place. Other people tell us, well, I can take out my pen and I can write right on the chart, or I can flip it over and rubber stamp it and fill in the back. Or I got one circular chart for each batch and it fits into the batch folder, and that's an easy way to keep track of our data. A lot of people, surprisingly, use a lot of alarms to notify them of critical situations, and they get those alarms off their chart recorders, and it becomes absolutely critical to their operation. So they're still using the recorders for alarming. And of course, there's the people that need calculations. You can fill in the blankets, F sub O, flow total, BTU, cook time, whatever it is, and the recorder performs that for them. Or typically, some government agency says that they have to be doing this. The problem is there's lots of issues with paper recording. These are exact quotes from all of our inside guys that we hear day after day after day. Cost of pens and charts keeps going up. I bought a box of pens on the internet. When I took them out, they were all dried up. It's hard to find paper with the right scales. Like, take a look down here. You got a paper with 2 different scales on it. They're typically oddball scales. That almost, if paper isn't 0 to 100, it tends to be special order. It's not standard. And there's a high dollar minimum order to get in a minimum order, 5, 6 boxes or whatever it is, and even a chart run type charge on it. And we've heard this over and over again. I've contacted everybody looking for this. Nobody has it in stock. Delivery's 3 weeks, and we can't help because there aren't a lot of vendors that stock paper anymore. There are the operational, what I call oops, out there. This is the chart hub down here, down in this corner down here. The circular hole in the paper fits around here, and then the little drive sprocket fits in the other hole in the paper that drives the paper around. And we get things like, well, Bill didn't get the chart hole onto the chart hub drive pin, so the chart didn't rotate. Or Johnny forgot to lower the pen on the paper. Somebody didn't press the chart button, take it out of chart hold mode. You can read these for yourself, but eventually you don't get the chart with the graph on it that you need to prove that the data was processed or that your stuff was processed in the appropriate manner. And of course, the one at the end there, down there, is the door didn't get shut all the way. Therefore, when it got washed down, the inside got wet. Chart readability is a big deal on circular or strip chart recorders. People say it's hard to tell which black line is which when they get close together. It's hard to figure out what happens when the timelines are oddballs. You can see down here in the circular chart, this timeline right here is 12 minutes after the hour. This timeline over here is 42 minutes after the hour. So it's sort of, you have to work at figuring out what these timeline values are in the interim because they're oddball numbers. And people will always say it's a judgment call on where the pen line, what the value is when the pen line falls between chart divisions. People say, you know, it's nice the fact that these recorders show you the digital value in the display there, but we need a record of the digital numbers and the chart trend line. The chart only gives us, you know, the analog line, you know, on the graph grid there. We need the digital number too. Or sometimes the chart speed we got just isn't the right chart speed for what we want to see. You know, everything gets all smashed together. We wish we could stretch it out. Some people have noticed that when you're using the drag pens, you know, the actual ink pens and the pre-printed chart paper, that the pen alignment can shift from lot to lot of chart paper. The chart paper isn't registered quite properly. They say, oh, we got to recal the chart in order to get it exactly where, you know, where the pen needs to be on the chart there. And there's always the issue of they need the larger charts for resolution because of the fact that you got to read the line on the graph grid, but those charts don't fit in the batch folder. You got to fold them up 4 times in order for them to get to fit. There's reliability. Pens dry out. The chart can stutter. The hub can break, so the chart doesn't rotate. Mechanical things do break at the worst time. There's the cost of repairing these things because they're mechanical, and the repair costs and the parts costs increase year to year. And there's the final one. We can't even buy parts for those recorders anymore. This is one, this doesn't happen very often, but somebody actually realized the lab air conditioner broke. So they opened the windows, and it was summertime. The humidity outside was 98% humidity. It actually swelled the chart paper so that it appeared that the temperature had actually gone out of spec on a freezer because the paper swelled with respect to where the pen was charting on there. It didn't, but the chart grid shifted and caused all sorts of problems in qualifying that particular lot of material. Data accessibility. When you archive this stuff, you hear this from people, we got to have to keep the data for X number of years. So they got dozens of filing cabinets. Sometimes it's local, sometimes it's off-site. It tends to be hard to get to, hard to find what you want, and people always want to delegate it to somebody else because nobody wants to be the librarian to go find that stuff. For their current data, sometimes you're in your office, but the chart recorder is in production, and you're the person that gets called, and you have to run down there, wherever it is, to actually see the chart, to find out what's happening, to analyze what's going on down there. Other people say, hey, we use our recorders for alarms. Yeah, it turns the alarm on, but it's difficult to tell why the alarm is on and what's actually happening because it isn't always obvious on circular charts or strip chart recorders for that matter, what's going on with an alarm situation. So we got the impact of recorder headaches. You know, the recorder can be the weak link in the chain. We hear this from people that they lost their circular chart recorder for that batch. The batch isn't usable without that circular chart to prove what happened with it. Or someone has to write an exception report because there was some upset in there, and now we've got to validate it that it's actually, you know, good. Or the wish list. What I really need is, and you can read these, every day's flow total pointed out. It's difficult to tell when there's a power outage. I wish I could make marks on the chart. Customers want to get the chart as an electronic file. These are things that the paper recorders just do not do. So there are now paperless recorders out there. By the way, we use the term paperless to avoid confusion with VCR video recorders. If we call them video recorders, people might think we were talking about recording TV shows. So what are paperless recorders? Well, they're commercial products, and they've been around since the mid-'80s. In the introduction, Mike mentioned that they're not a fad. They've been around for 30 years now. That's true. They've evolved continuously. The Honeywells are actually in their 7th generation at this point. They're all solid state, and they have no moving parts. There's no chart motors, pen motors. Particularly, there's no floppy disk. We're grateful for that because the first 20 years we had to deal with floppy disks. The memory is flash memory. You can see the little image over here for the SD card, and it's the flash memory like you have in your camera. There's no battery backup needed to maintain the data in the recorder. And these nowadays are huge memories. They're gigabytes worth of memories. So it means you can store years worth of data on these flash cards. So you're not limited to what's on the paper. You can have years worth of data stored for you. In terms of looking at your data, the real-time data shows up on the LCD display, the video part of it. The near-term data, there are scroll back or playback functions that allow you to scroll back and look at the data, just like you would on a strip chart recorder. You unroll the rolled up paper, scroll back and take a look at it. Or for archive data, typically you take the archive data on a USB flash drive or with a network, you put it into a Windows PC, and then you use the software to search for the data. When you find it, then you take a look at it, analyze it, do what you need to do at that point. So paperless recorders, because they got this LCD screen on them, you can have multiple screens. Huge difference from ordinary paper recorders where you're stuck with what's on the paper. Whatever the scale is, whatever the chart speed is, you're stuck with that. With a paperless recorder, you can have multiple screens. So theoretically, you could have all these screens on one recorder, all for one particular process device, or you can have multiple process devices. So we have a couple screens for each one of them on there. And you can see here, this one happens to be horizontal trends, and it's got the digital numbers up there. This one is just digital values, horizontal bar graphs, vertical bar graphs. And this is the vertical trend down here, just like the traditional industrial process strip chart recorder, where you got the vertical trending and then the scales up on top. Over here, we see the alarm screen. I can look at that instantly and count. I got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of these points are an alarm because they're red, and the rest are green. We'll show a blow up of the screen later on, so you can tell from that screen what's actually going on with the alarms. And then this newest recorder down here has the circular format on it, so that you can actually get the circular video or LCD format. It's easy to make connections to these. There's screw terminals in the back, and it's set up with a universal input card for the typical kinds of things that people use recorders for. Thermocouples, RTDs, 4 to 20, 0 to 5 volts, all that kind of stuff. It's easy to navigate on here because it's a touch screen. You touch it and you navigate to where you want to go. You got buttons and all that sort of stuff. If you want to, you can hook up a USB mouse and a USB keyboard, connect them into the USB port on here, and you can navigate that way. Or with remote access over the network, you can take control of it and do the same things that you do locally over the network. This is different than other devices because, like recorders have always been, it's menu-driven for setup. Now, that's different than, I'll show you some screens later on, of what I call blank slate programming. Blank slate programming is what you do with PLCs and HMIs. There's a development program, and when you start out, you literally start out with a blank slate. You have to tell it what you want to do in what order and all that kind of stuff, because you're a programmer when you do that. Recorders, when you deal with recorders like this, you don't need to be a programmer. The example here is I want to change the scale from 100 to 200. So you hit the menu button, you tell it you want to configure, this screen comes up, you tell it I want to go to a pen, you pick the pen you want, and under the pen you see the scale down here. When you click on that, you see that the span is 100. When you click on that, it comes up and gives you the box where you can type in 200 to change the span from 100 to 200. So this thing, you just drill down through it, make the change, get out of it, change is done. There's no programming. There's no if-thens. There's no declaring variables. There's no arrays. None of that kind of stuff that you deal with in programming. It's menu-driven. Paperless recorders mark the chart. We always got to deal with a person that says, hey, I take my pen out and I write on the chart. How do you do that on a paperless recorder? Well, when you click on this little button up here, you get a submenu that says Mark. When you click that, you get this. This is actually a full screen with a full keyboard on it, but I clipped it off at the bottom to sort of fit on the page here. But you type in on the screen what you want it to say. So our message here is that server room alarm is checked, and then the guy's name, Doug. It actually marks the chart, and here's what it looks like. There's our strip chart right here, and there's the timeline for when it happened, and there's the message. So it comes up right on the trend screen itself. It also shows up in the user log over here. Same thing, server room alarm checked, the date and the timestamp for it. So you have a total record of messages related to the chart. With a paperless recorder, you actually get 3 chart speeds built into one, and they call them, obviously, fast, medium, and slow. And you can pick these values over here. There's a selection of 5 or 6 values for each one. That just happens to be the ones that are up there right now. So so for any given data set, you can change the chart speed just by selecting a different one, and it instantly pops up and shows you the different ones. And I'll show you these coming up here. Here's the fast speed right here, where we have a timeline every 10 seconds. Notice over here, this timeline is at 13 minutes and 20 seconds. This timeline is at 13 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's only 10 seconds between timelines. So the data is going to be fairly straight because you don't have a lot of change over 10 seconds. This is the medium speed. Now we're down to a timeline every 10 minutes. That's 8 p.m. on the hour. This is 8 p.m. and 10 minutes after the hour. So there's 10 minutes between these timelines right here. And then we've got the the slow speed down here. And this is actually should be timeline every 2 hours, but you notice I got a power on, power off indication up here where the power is off for 3 hours. So that's why you got a gap between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. up there. It's actually a 2-hour timeline up here. But just notice how the data appears here. Here we have very compressed data. You can see the trend changes over here. And there you have the data stretched out in a much more drawn out fashion. And here we've got almost straight line data. It's the same data, it's just you're looking at it on different timelines. You can't do this with paper recorders because you've only got the ink pen on the paper showing you what the data was in real time as it occurred. There's no way to go back and reconfigure it like this. So people say, oh, this is really a nice idea, but we really do need a printed chart. We just can't get away with it. Well, there's 2 ways to do this. One way is to take your recorder, which is over here, hook it up to the network, so you got a PC, and you can actually view the recorder screen. Notice that these screens are identical. You can view the recorder screen right on the PC. So you use the print screen button on your keyboard down here, print screen, it grabs the image, you paste it into typically a Word doc, and then you print it on a network printer. The other way is that if you hook it up to a Hewlett-Packard printer with a USB cable, there's actually a print instruction in the menu up there that says print the chart. Hit print the chart, it goes out, and it does this. The difference is this is a locally connected USB cable right here. This is a network printer, so it can be almost anywhere. It doesn't even have to be in the same building for that matter. Paperless recorders can do batch. By batch, I mean a lot of people out there, well, the world is divided into either continuous or batch. But in the batch world, it frequently helps if you can have IDs that identify the batch. So the recorders give you the ability to assign 4 different fields of batch information. You can see them up here. They're called name, user ID, lot number, description. And you can either enter these on the touchscreen keypad, or you can use a USB barcode reader. If you've already got shop orders that have barcodes on them, just shoot the barcode in there and eliminate all the possibility of error by keyboard entry. The advantage of batch is that when you record data by batch, when you look at the batches in the software, you'll find a big list of batches, and then you got a whole bunch of buttons over here that are there to allow you to search for a given batch by ID, so that you can very quickly find the batch in the, what is probably an archive of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of batches, to find the one that you're looking for and pop it up and show it to you. And when you get it, you'll see that it's the actual data with the batch number up here and the notation start and stop, so that it's actually annotated on the chart for what the batch duration was. A lot of people use these recorders for alarms. This is the same screen we saw before with 4 points and alarm over here, the red ones. And it gives you virtually everything you want to do. Lots of alarms per pen. You can actually lock down the alarm settings, or you can have them editable, typically if a person has enough security access to get in and do that. Delay times, pre-triggers, you can read all those big buttons over there, but the one that people really like nowadays is the email or a text message on alarm. So it goes out and it notifies the people that want to be able to call back, typically supervisors, and say, did somebody check that? You okay on that? What's the follow-up? That kind of thing. It's easy to get the data out of paperless recorders. The choices are one of 2. You got a USB flash drive up here. On this recorder, you open the door. On any of them, you open the door. There's a USB port in there. Stick the USB stick in there. On the touch screen, you tell it to export the data to the drive. You walk the drive over to the PC. You import the data, and there it is. Or you hook it up on the network, like we see here with a little network switch there, and that allows you not only to see the screen, but to import the data directly from the recorder and put it into the database that the software maintains, so that you can find your archive data very quickly. This part right here, just this concept here, this is what I call data on the desktop. And this is what people asked for I've been doing this for 30 years now. For 20 years, people were saying, all I really want to do is look at the data on my desktop. And nowadays, you can do that, and it's, as you see, it's whatever shows up on the recorder screen here is the recorder screen there. This is, you can actually do it more than just an observation thing. You can actually take control of it. So if you have to scroll back or change screens, you can do all that from the PC. You don't have to be sitting or standing there in front of the recorder and dealing with it locally. Paperless recorders, because they have multiple screens, you can actually consolidate. It wouldn't be any problem to take 3 separate circular chart recorders or a couple different strip chart recorders and put all the data into one paperless recorder, because you have multiple screens. So you isolate them. You know, a screen is dedicated to a given device's information, or a couple of screens are dedicated to a given device's application. Very easy to do that. So given the fact that so many of the remaining chart recorders out there are circular, I just want to focus on how Honeywell's recently introduced DR recorder can be a replacement for a circular chart recorder. The door opens on this, and when you open it up, you'll see that there's where the USB ports are up there. It shows a couple sticks stuck in there. But again, once you've wired this thing up, if you don't have to go into it and actually get data with a USB stick, there is no reason to actually open the door at that point. It's not a circular chart recorder. There's no paper to change. There's no pens to change. There's no pen arm to align to a timeline. That's all done internally. The door opens primarily to access the wiring or to access the USB port when you want to transfer data out of it. If you put the recorder on a network so you can pull the data off it, there's no reason to ever open the door. So the recorder has a nice stainless steel latch over here. It's got a 1/4 turn locking pin on it. They supply this little key that actually goes into the lock thing, and you know, and this is all there because there's a NEMA 4. This is, the door is sealed with a NEMA 4 gasket so that it can be a washdown recorder. So you latch the thing closed, you lock it with a key, and you don't have to go into it after that. So there's no reason to actually ever have to open this if you put the recorder on a network. The recorder fits into the standard cutout that's 12.7 inches by 12.7 inches. That's the cutout for the Honeywell DR4300 or for the TrueLine chart recorder. So it'll fit into an existing panel cutout. The depth on the new one is only 3 inches behind the panel. It's 4.2 on the other ones, so it's even a shallower one, so it's not going to bump into anything in the panel. It can be freestanding. This, to me, is an enormous advantage of the DR recorder. We have seen people take the other TrendView electronic recorders and just put them on top of an appliance, like a refrigerator or freezer, and you know, they're monitoring the temperatures in there. But with just a little leg on this, you can stick it anywhere, and it's freestanding. And you bring the wires out the bottom. There are no exposed power terminals or wiring terminals on this, so that it can be freestanding. There's no problem with doing that. It also wall mounts. It's got the same brackets and hangers just like the other circular chart recorders do. Here you can see one up on the wall right there, and it's a direct replacement for any wall-mounted circular recorder. The advantage of wall mount or freestanding is that you don't have the cost of a panel. On our other recorder with the multi-trend that has the same size screen on it, that's a 9-inch deep recorder, so you need a 12-inch deep panel by the time you put a sub-panel in it. But you put that into a stainless 12-inch deep panel, it's probably 24 by 24. You have a relatively expensive panel, plus you have all the labor costs of cutting the hole, putting the thing in there, doing the wiring on it, putting the fuse and all that other kind of stuff in there. And you also end up with something that's fairly heavy to mount on the wall. The recorder itself, less weight, mounts up there. Down here, these are prices from 2009 that I had from our panel builder for the larger model, the multi-trend. Back then it was $1,000 to put it in the box and do all the stuff and have it ready to go. By now it's probably about $1,300, and you can see for the smaller recorder, because it needs a smaller box, $700, and that's probably $1,000. That's an added cost that you don't have to bear if you directly do wall mount or freestanding. People have asked, how well does this circular chart recorder resolve the data? Because they've been using the 12-inch circular chart recorder, and they think it's more accurate than the paperless. Well, it's not actually accuracy, but resolution. But the TrueLine is spec'd as a 12-inch diameter chart. But you can see from the image there with the ruler on the piece of paper that the effective scale chart height is only 4.5 inches. And yes, actually, this part actually aligns with that down there, but there's parallax because of the camera shot on there. But it is actually 4.5 inches, which is only marginally better than the old 100mm 4-inch strip chart recorders. So when you look at the equivalent one on the DR recorder, you see that the DR recorder only has a 3-inch chart height on the screen. But that's just for an overall image, because when you actually go to replay the data, the chart goes from the circular format and automatically pops to the strip chart format, because the strip chart format is not only 6.5 inches tall, but as you'll see here, the data for where the cursor crosses the curve, the cursor is right here on the curve, the cursor shows you the digital values over on the side over there. So you're actually reading the real digital numbers that were recorded. You're not guessing at what the trend line was with respect to the graph grid on the screen there. So the digital resolution is easily 2 to 3 times better than that which it is on the true line recorder. So in answer to the question, does the DR recorder resolve data? Well, yes, it does it 2 to 3 times better than the true line, probably 4 to 5 times better than it does on the pen draggers, particularly if the pen starts getting banged and it has a thick, it creates a thick line on the chart. So there's really a question. Yes, there is a circular format on these paperless recorders, but would you use it? If we go back 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we had earlier models that had the same circular format. I don't know of anybody that ever used it. When the former X series dropped the circular format, nobody complained because I don't think anybody ever used it. Most people agree that what they call the YT, which means you got your data value over a time base, that mode is much easier to interpret because it's sort of like the way we read. We have old data on the left, new data on the right. We read from left to right, and everybody's happy with that. But it's your choice. You want to go with circular, go with circular. Most people will probably opt to go with a YT format, strip chart type format. People have asked, well, if I'm thinking about changing from paper, why can't I just go with a PLC HMI and some software? You can't, but believe me, you're going to pay a lot more. Here's a combination right here. You can see some prices for an HMI and the associated I/O hardware that goes with it. And we go over here to the recorder, and to me the big thing is that the trend view is menu configured. The PLC HMI is blank slate programming, which for most people means they need a systems integrator to help them do that. And so what we really see is we got some hardware here for the HMI, some hardware for the I/O. It's all got to be put in a box. Particularly this stuff here is all exposed. That can be out in the open. So you got to put it in the panel. Then you got to have the guy do it. So you got all that, or you got the circular chart recorder down there, or the paperless recorder. It doesn't have to be circular. So you can look into that, but I think your costs are going to be significantly higher than just replacing with a paperless recorder. How does paperless address some of these issues? Well, we had all those issues about consumables. With paperless, there are no consumables unless you choose to print a chart with a network printer or with a local inkjet printer. And if you do that, you're going to, if you're going to print with paper, you're going to print with paper. There's no way you can get around the consumables issue. But you don't necessarily have to have specialty paper and specialty pens, particularly paper that can be difficult to obtain. You just do it on a network printer. The operational oopses. Well, there's no chart hole and chart hub drive pen because it's electronic data. It's just an image and a set of numbers, so you don't have to do that. What about when you didn't lower the pen onto the paper? Again, it's electronic data. There's no chart, no thermal ink, no ink pen. If you forgot to press the chart button, the recorder's recording all, well, actually, I advise people, there's no reason not to record data all the time. Memory is effectively dirt cheap nowadays. Yes, you can technically turn off the recorder. You can say, yeah, show me the image, but don't record it. There's no reason to do so. Just record data all the time. So there's no reason to have to remember to go back and turn it on. It's always recording. On the situation where they didn't align the right timeline, well, the timestamps are assigned as part of the recording process. You can't do this with a paperless recorder because they're going to be 2 different sets of data, each with their own timestamps on them that have the right data on there. There's no chart hub to twist because, again, there's no mechanics on this, no mechanical stuff. It's all electronic data. The door didn't get shut all the way. Well, if you network this, there's no reason to ever open the drive, and even if you do, you pop the USB drive in. You do have to remember to shut it after that. We can't get around that if you're going to collect data with a USB drive. For readability, the paperless recorder always uses multiple colors on there, and you can select whatever. It defaults to different colors. You can change it if you want to. You can also make the lines thicker, thinner if you want to, so if you want to distinguish them that way, it's easy to do that. It's hard to tell when things are happening because of the oddball timelines. Notice down here, the timelines on the Honeywell, at least, are always even, and they're rounded to be even. This is 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. for the timeline that goes down on each one like that. They always round it off. You never get hit with oddball minutes or oddball seconds. We need digital numbers as well as the chart trend line. Well, if you want to do it on the screen itself, this is called tabular format. It shows you the date stamp and then the value for the number of pens that you got up there. You see that there's space for, whatever it is, 3 or 4 more pens over there. When you export the data, you can look at it as a set of data values in an Excel spreadsheet format or a .csv format, where you look at it as rows and columns of data. So that's part of electronic data recording. It can be a judgment call on where the pen line is. Well, you really use the cursor in replay mode to show you what the value is. By the way, there's 2 values up there because for where I've got the pen at that point, that's the maximum and that's the minimum for the area that the cursor covers. If you were to expand the data, you could get it down to individual points. You'd only have 1 data value up there. But with compressed data, there might be 2 values up there because it's max min. Sometimes you just need a faster chart speed. Well, you've got it. You pick fast, medium, or slow, and for any given set of data, and it's up there. Pen alignment shifts. If you don't have paper, you don't have pen alignment shifting from lot to lot of paper. Resolution, it's the same situation here. I'm actually reading the digital value. It's not a question of, do I need a big chart in order to resolve it? I always have digital numbers to look at. So that's what I'm going to make my determination on, is the digital number, not on where the trend line fits between the graph grid. If you don't have pens and paper and moving parts, you get rid of all that kind of stuff. The reliability is in the flash drive over here because it's solid state memory, doesn't need battery backup, holds the data. Can't buy parts for those recorders, sad but true. That's just life. If you can't have paper swell if you don't have paper because the data is digital. For the accessibility, you get rid of all those file cabinets there will fit on the 16 gigabytes worth of memory. Believe me, that's 16 gigabytes of memory is a lot of memory. You can have years worth of data in there. It avoids having this data accessible over the network means you don't have to walk down the corridors and up and down the stairs and all that kind of stuff because you can look at the data on your desktop. Get the recorder up on a network. And by the way, it doesn't have to be just your PC that can look at it. Anybody that installs a little app can do that. Now, there is security access for this on the recorder to make sure that people are authorized to get in and make changes on it or to shift around. So you have usernames and passwords to protect the integrity of the data for that. But the point is, it's not limited to one desktop or whatever. You can have lots of desktops to look at the data. And if you're doing alarm data right here you can see that that's set up for a low alarm. That's set up for a low alarm, but it's active because it's colored right here. We got the red on here. The little up arrow is a high alarm, so there's a high alarm and a low alarm in this point, and it's gone into low alarm. There's other screens on here that I don't have illustrated, but you can actually go in and find out what the alarm points are and what the bands are and all that other kind of stuff that are involved with alarm setup. So you can really find out what's alarming and why it's an alarm. In terms of these headaches here, you don't lose data when it's electronic. That's the whole deal. You record continuously. You've always got the data. You're not going to be stuck because something happened mechanically on the recorder to stop your data recording. It greatly reduces the necessity to do things like write exception reports because you're not losing that data. It's stored in digital memory. I want something that sends an email on critical alarm, and here you can actually see an example. I just printed this out. Pen 2, which is cooler number 1, the 4th alarm went off at 1:32 when it's high. So you can actually get this information texted to you or emailed to you. I actually want to put start and end markers on there. That's what batch does. If the signal comes from the PLC, fine. If it doesn't come from the keyboard, you put start and end markers on your chart data. I need my day's flow totals printed out. The recorder has a number of reports that it can generate. Here's a report that gives, you can see down here on the 23rd, that was our totalizer value. It got higher on the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, and so on. Just goes through and it tells you that what recorder it came from. So it's a little report, comes out in RTF format so that you can print it out in Word. Or if I got a power outage, on an earlier trend screen we saw where it actually marks it on the trend screen. It also goes in the system messages so you can tell exactly when you had power outages and for how long. So you can say, I love it, you sold me, but my boss says, convince me, okay? Boss isn't on board. What do you do? Well, the boss wants to know what the payback is, because nobody gets money to buy a recorder because it's cool or it needs or it connects or does any of this nifty stuff. It has to have a payback. Well, the payback eliminates costs, okay? And that can be the cost, probably the biggest one ever is always the cost of lost production due to some recorder, when the recorder fails for some reason. Or it's the productivity that's lost because you're trying to fix what happened when the recorder broke. And it can be fines or the cost of citations from a regulatory agency. You got the standard running cost of buying all the consumables, repairing it, just trying to find the archive data when you need it by going back to the file cabinets, pulling it out, making the copies, doing all that kind of stuff. And there are the costs of doing it like you've always done it, because although inertia is sometimes easy, it's staying the same because your competitors are probably moving on to something that's more efficient. So what you need to do if you don't know what these costs are is say, hey, I think I can save the company money, and ask, what do these things cost us? Total them up, crunch the numbers, and go to the boss and say, look, it costs us this much, for this to happen. We can change, and it costs us this much. What you can determine, does the cost of staying the same exceed, or is it less than the cost of change, and make a decision. So we can help you with telling you what the purchase price is, and if you need us to come in and install it and commission it or do some training on it, which, by the way, we only do that in a fraction of the cases because, again, it's a recorder. And if you've got people on site that are used to configuring recorders, this one's probably easier than the other ones are because it's got a full screen on there. When you go through the menu, it's easier to figure out what you're making your changes on. Or we can run a little report that tells you what you spent with Lesman on recorder consumables, pens and chart papers and that kind of stuff. So we can help on that side. So there's lots of choices out there. We've just talked about this DR recorder right here, but we got other recorders that might fit your application more effectively than this one does. Nothing says you got to buy the DR recorder. We got other ones here that work. So let us know if you're ready and when you're ready to move from paper, and we'll help you on that. Questions?
I don't have any questions that have come up. While we are wrapping up, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat tool. In the meantime, Dan, thank you very much for your presentation. If any of you do have any specific application questions, feel free to give us a call at 800-9-LESMAN or 800-953-7626. If you do not know your account manager, please feel free to ask for me or for Dan. Either one of us will get you taken care of. Our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, September 22nd at 9 a.m. It will again be presented by Dan and will be a continuation of this webinar. We're going to introduce you to the power of the industrial Internet of Things, basically how these recorders connect to the Internet and get all of your legacy sensors onto your desktop. You will be getting messages or emails regarding that upcoming webinar, so just feel free to sign up if you're interested. You can also find out about it at lesman.com in the training area. It's also listed there, and you can sign up from there as well. We do have a question. What's the reliability of paperless recorders?
Extremely high. we have very few actual hardware component failures. This last series that's been out for the last 7 or 8 years here, I think we've sold 2 power supplies and a handful of I/O cards. And anybody that does this realizes that I/O cards fail for various reasons over time, but they're very reliable. The paper, what will happen with a paperless recorder is the bulb will tend to go from bright white to yellow over a long period of time, 7, 8, 9 years. There's actually a factor in, there's a screen that tells you how many hours of brightness are left in that, but that's probably the bulb in there is probably the one consumable in there, but they tend to be very reliable because they don't have any mechanical moving parts.
We have a significant number of them in the pharmaceutical industry where they have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of pharmaceuticals in anything from incubators to freezers to refrigerators to whatever, and they need to know when they go into alarm immediately so they can go save their pharmaceuticals. So it's working well. The next question we have, Dan, is do they meet the calibration accuracy of AMS 2750E for use in heat treat?
Yes, in fact, there is a Honeywell actually has an optional software package for AMS 2750 that actually for thermal uniformity surveys, TUSs, that converts the recorder into a survey recorder. There's also an option for process recording if you're in the world where you have to manage your thermocouples for the number of heats that they have at a given point. In other words, once it goes above 1600, I can use the thing 3 times over 16, or whatever the number is, 15 times over 1600. There's an option for the process recorder that's the one that's the day in, day out use recorder that will track thermocouple usage and the number of times it's been through that service. So yes, AMS 2750 is well within the scope of the paperless recorder. We do it all the time.
Next question is, we have a custom box / cutout opening, I'm assuming in their panel. Can we take a look at it and see if the recorder will fit into it? Absolutely.
And if not, we can get an adapter plate fab for you.
Yeah, so we have plenty of panel shops we work with to make sure that we can get that to look nice and work well. Next question, can you attach a UPS system to power through any outages to assure data collection is not lost?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would probably say that because of the critical nature where these are put, a lot of times, I would suggest 60 to 70% of all these recorders are on a UPS backup. The other thing is that what the UPS usually provides is not only battery backup, but they also usually have very good filtering on the line for spikes and that kind of stuff. But they're excellent for brownout protection, and I actually recommend the use of UPS with it. And it doesn't have to be an expensive UPS. Those little $70 ones that people use for desktop PCs work fine with these. They don't throw a lot. The recorders don't throw a lot of power.
Typically, when we do custom panels, we'll throw UPSs in the bottom of the panels. And as Dan says, we'll even go to CDW and buy APC, you know, power supplies so that we can make sure they're powered up. Next question: can you create custom end-of-run reports? One where the recorder is actually analyzing the data for temperature and time requirements.
The answer to that is it depends. Sometimes you can get the report you're looking for. Sometimes you can't. This is not a programmable PC where we have full customizable capabilities, but it does have a number of report formats in it. The one example I showed up there was doing the daily totals. You know, you get a report of daily totals over a period of time. There are a number of other formats that are involved with that. So it depends. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. We'd love to talk to you about what it is and see whether we could do it.
And in a lot of cases, from Trend Server Pro, you can fall right into Excel and create the reports you want right out of that. So,
correct.
And all of the connectivity is getting so much easier, and that's really what the next session is going to talk about, is the connectivity and OPC and OPC UA, and some of the things that are coming out on these recorders that make it really easy to connect. Can these recorders take flat file recipe inputs? We're going to have to explore that one a little further.
Well, the recipe inputs are typically put into a controller. In other words, you're telling it what the variables are for a control batch recipe, at least the way I would interpret that. If, in terms of if you're looking for batch ID identifiers, the answer would be no. Each field has to be entered individually, either with the USB barcode reader or via keyboard type entry on that.
So the next question, and this is really, I think, a ramp soap controller question as much as it is a recorder question. Can the recorder analyze data beyond the temperature being too high or too low? Something like time at temperature. Can you have recorder, or can you have alarms time at temperature?
The F sub O is technically the pharmaceuticals use something called F sub O, which is a time at temperature calculation. There's another one that we've done that I just can't recall the buzzword for it. The answer to that is probably yes. I'd like to talk to you about it in detail, but I'm going to give you a probably yes answer to that.
Batch ID, okay. Barcode, okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Most of the people that are using barcodes with this thing are scanning them in as opposed to entering them.
Yes.
It's just way easier to get that barcode entered.
And it's more accurate.
I think that's the end of our questions. If you do have any others, please feel free to call Dan or I. We can certainly take care of it and get your questions answered.